You are now listening to the Purple Fox Podcast.
I really wish that the Democratic Party, and obviously Biden serves it as its figurehead, that they would actually, stick to their promises that they give us every election cycle. So it's really disturbing that literally, the person that the Democrats say is way worse for the country, former president. That president paused these student loans, and now we have a president who not only said that he would be better overall, but that he specifically promised this to millions of people that did vote for him because of that promise. It really is a huge slap in the face, and I think it's going to probably harm the Democrats for sure.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Purple Fox Podcast. Today I have Rodolfo Cortes in the foxhole with me. Rodolfo is a community advocate in Southeast LA. He has been involved in many movements for immigrant and tenant rights. He previously ran for office, including Congress, and he is known to help many local activists in their elections. He is especially known for his fight against what he sees as corruption in local governments. Welcome, Rodolfo.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about a few things from the federal level to the local level, kind of trickle down. But first, I'll just start with how have you been? What have you been up to?
I've been good. It's I'm a very political person, so there's been a lot of political development. So that occupies a lot of my time. Yeah. But it's like kind of a hobby, so right. It's a good thing that.
Especially these days with COVID happening.
Exactly.
There's so much being revealed.
Yeah, there's every 10 minutes there's a new interesting story about certainly the politics of COVID and everything around it. So fun times.
Definitely. So I wanted to start with the student loan situation. So previously Biden promised on his campaign trail that he would knock off at least $10,000 in student loan debt for those either leaving or who have left in the past, or I think it was just those in general who have student loans. So this political article by Eugene Daniels entitled "White House Not Budging on February 1st End to Student Loan Forgiveness" was one that caught my attention. The opening statement, quote, "The White House has been pretty clear in recent days. Federal student loan payments will resume February 1st as President Joe Biden lifts the nearly 2-year pandemic-era pause despite pressure from many in his own party to extend it." So my question to you, considering that Biden promised this on his campaign trail, how much do you think this will hurt his administration going forward?
I really wish that the Democratic Party, and obviously Biden serves it as its figurehead, that they would actually, stick to their promises that they give us every election cycle. So it's really disturbing that literally, the person that the Democrats say is way worse for the country, former president. That president paused these student loans, and now we have a president who not only said that he, would be better overall, but that he specifically promised this to millions of people that did vote for him because of that promise. It really is a huge slap in the face, and I think it's going to probably harm the Democrats for sure, because a lot of that people vote with their pocketbooks, and so why would you undercut your own message yourself like this? Well, we could go into all sorts of reasons for it that but it I think it'll present a huge problem for the Democrats. People just won't be as enthusiastic about them, and I think that's why they're already saying, "Oh, we might be in trouble." But of course, that's a completely self-inflicted wound.
Right. I mean, and to make this move when so many are predicting what they're calling a red wave in 2022, you know, we saw what they thought was going to be a successful run in Virginia when Youngkin took that race, and to make a move that's so risky, the Democrats are starting to become the party of failed promises. It's becoming their linchpin. That's what they do now.
So it's difficult to underestimate how much this is going to hurt the Democrats. People turn out to vote when they're excited about candidates and ideas. So who are the Democrats going to have turn out? They are promising a lot now, a lot of similar ideas to certainly the Republican Party. Where are the students? Are the single moms? Everyone who's looking for a better future, are they going to show up in droves to the Democrats now that they're just not fulfilling their promises yet again? So, say in this case with the student loans, trillions of dollars are on the line here. Those trillions of dollars could certainly be better spent, not sent to the Department of Education, which doesn't need it, but rather spent in the local economy, making producing a small business. Even just going out to shop. All those are choices that the Democratic Party is making, and which are hurting the people, and will certainly hurt the electoral prospects of the Democratic Party in this midterm election.
In the political article, Eugene Daniels goes on further to say, quote, "For the Department of Education's review of whether Biden has the authority to unilaterally cancel at least $10,000 of student debt per borrower, which Biden campaigned on, the administration officials said that conversations are still happening and no final determination has been made. An official did say that Biden is still ready to sign a $10,000 student loan forgiveness bill into law if Congress can pass it." I believe that was Jen Psaki. I think I watched that press conference. How does this news make you feel about the future prospects of younger Americans just leaving the college level?
Well, if you look at the figures, the current crop of students that is just leaving college, of course, they're leaving college with more debt than, say, I did and many people in my generation did, because the cost of college have gone up. Consequently, the amount in loans from the Department of Education, as well as private loan providers, has increased dramatically. So, we've seen a lot of headlines about how millennials, I'm a millennial, and how, we're affected by, the average, $50,000 student loan. So now it's going to be 75, 85.
Right.
Thousand. So of course, it's tragic that our country just keeps inflicting self-harm in this way. You're saying, that quote. So they're having these conversations.
Right.
Okay, so really, the Department of Ed, belongs essentially
and
to.
It shouldn't even be a conversation. This is like these are things that need to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't understand why. Why is it that they refuse to to give young people, a break, and some help that will help the country? I mean, we did not used to act in this way, like way back, after the war. Like, for example, they had the GI Bill. They facilitated education for people. They facilitated home ownership. Now it's the exact opposite. So there can be no way to go with those kind of policies other than down.
And it's so interesting to me because people talk so much crap on millennials, but I don't think some generations understand just how resilient we actually are. It could have been a lot worse. I think Sagar and Jetty put it the most succinctly for me, which is most of us were just coming into our own, not financially, but like just as a person. Younger elementary levels when 9/11 happens. So now you get 9/11, and then we see an escalation of fear in our childhoods, all the way up to the financial crisis of '07, '08. And so we see, most of us see our families get pummeled by financial issues, and then we get rocketed into, when we're actually coming into our own financially, and as adults, one of the most tumultuous election political dynamics ever in 2016, and we see that play out all the way up until now, when most of us are at a level where most at this age of the generations would have been building their wealth, getting homes, starting families, and then we get hit for these last 2 years with one of the worst pandemics that has ever happened. So it's crazy when you think about that. Do you have student loans at all?
I actually do. I still do. I mean, and I don't even have that much in student loans left over to fork over back to the Department of Ed. I'm certainly on the low end. I'll give you, an anecdote. Recently, I was contacted by someone. So, right, I'm a local advocate for various things, but I was contacted by someone who has $130,000 in student loan debt. So, and she talked, and she's been trying to create a kind of a protest movement,
Right.
because for her it was really the first time during this pandemic when she could actually save some money, given that the student loans were on pause. So now she's mortally afraid for what's going to happen in February.
Scary.
Because literally she's just gonna not be able to go get some, go to a nice restaurant with, for her family, and of course that'll be some money lost in the local economy,
Right.
all just sent to an accounting spreadsheet
Sure.
at the Department of Education. So this is economic nonsense. It's and of course it's cruelty towards the youth.
And at this point, we are some of the biggest spenders, and you know a lot of economists are praising how well the economy is doing at present. And when you think about what's gone on the last 2 years, there was that stimulus, there was that pausing of the student loan debt, there was, in some cases, a moratorium on late payments for rent. And so we had this economic freedom, and then you started to see these revolutionary things like the meme stock rush that happened earlier this year. People actually were confident enough to put their money in some investments, and they saw some returns. A lot of people were helped out of the dire straits that they were in because they had that breathing room, that freedom. So yeah, like, to your point, it makes no sense that they would consider bringing the chokehold when, in a lot of ways, this pandemic hasn't even really left us.
Yeah, and it's not really gonna leave us anytime soon. I think we can see that with the development of this new strain. This new variant, as they call it. But one thing is the virus and how deadly it is, or how it harms different aspects of our bodies, and leads to hospitalization. But a quite different thing is the policy response to it. So that's truly where our country has dramatically failed. And all countries are just some have done better than others, but ours has done abysmally bad. We've always talked about ourselves as the quote #1 country in the world,
which makes no sense.
It makes no.
I don't know how anyone can even start to claim that right now.
Of course, we are a disaster of a country. I pretty much think we're a failed state.
It's GDP though. The money is king. And that's what they call.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned those economists that they're saying, oh, the economy is going up and up. Well, it's going up and up for a small segment of people who are getting more money from the rest of the people. But eventually, you cannot have a functional market economy if the workers can't go out and buy stuff, can't go out and enjoy life. Eventually it just collapses. Um, and right now we're just seeing the tightening of people that already had very little money. Before the pandemic, there were constant headlines about most Americans only have $400 in their savings account or bank balance.
It's so true.
And so now, I mean, you don't hear many headlines about that. Maybe now it's $0 or $10. So it's truly it's not a sustainable situation. So we're just gonna have to see what happens.
What does this tell you about our elected officials? Like what kind of people are these people? Like what to even consider the kind of activity that's going on when they could make these easy decisions that could take us out of these situations.
Well, our elected officials, oftentimes they're labeled corrupt, which they, I think, certainly are.
And we've seen a lot of that
in
recent weeks.
Yes, so they're certainly corrupt, but I also think that they're clueless. They're skilled at taking money from the public and from the corporations and all those bribes essentially that they get. They're skilled at that, but other than that, they're not highly skilled people. They don't understand how the world truly works. They don't understand ecology. They don't understand overall economic growth. They don't understand that. If they did, well, they would do what many leading scholars tell them to do, but they don't. They have all sorts of economists telling them, invest in youth, help seniors, establish what they call Medicare for all. These are all policies that very intelligent people suggest, and they ignore all of them.
I think these people, they just don't know what life looks like below or around the poverty line. I think they don't know anyone from that side of the spectrum, and they don't make it a point. I don't understand why they wouldn't make it a point to know. I feel like it should be a regular thing to immerse yourself in that, to get a taste of that, even if you do live a higher class lifestyle, to even just immerse yourself in it for maybe a couple of weeks, to get a sense of what people are actually going through, not just when you're campaigning, because that's when you get labeled a BS artist, because you only seek to understand what's happening below the poverty line when votes are on the line. That's not genuine. Nothing about that is genuine.
Absolutely. They definitely do not represent, meaning they do not resemble the average American by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly in terms of wealth, maybe that's the primary deciding factor, because you can have, in fact, we do have a lot of, say, underrepresented minority elected officials, but oftentimes they're coming from economic backgrounds that are completely different than what the vast majority of the people, either Black, Asian, Hispanic background might be. It's just a very different situation. And they, unfortunately, I agree with you. I mean, they should take it upon themselves to try to go out there in the world and try to understand what regular people are like, but they do not. They either never get that idea, none of their advisors will ever tell them to do that.
I guess not.
And they certainly don't.
I don't know what your advisors are doing if they're not advising you to do those things. You got to have some better people around you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But does this inspire any particular action for you? Like what does this rile up in you? This lack of concern, this lack of empathy for the situation, and the clear the clear knowing of what needs to happen and having it not happen right in front of your eyes?
Right. So for me, I happen to be someone that likes to engage with what I see as problems and try to find solutions.
I definitely know that to be true. I've seen it firsthand.
So, that's why, I certainly support, attempting to remove those individuals from power, so that they are replaced by people that perhaps do understand a bit more about what regular people are actually like, and what their needs are. Because right now, the vast majority of the American population is not truly represented in the government. We have a very small sliver of people with oftentimes very similar backgrounds, educations, and worldviews in positions of power. I mean, just one example, just look at their professions. Most of them are either lawyers or business people. This is not a knock on lawyers or business people, but where are the doctors?
We're the scientists.
The scientists,
the engineers.
for
We need
sure.
some diversity,
Yes, exactly.
Some diversity of thought.
Yes. So there's diversity of background, of intellectual background.
Teachers.
Yes, absolutely. All those people, all those type of professions are missing from government, as are, of course, working class people, and almost entirely missing from the government entirely.
Yeah. And then what does a U.S. without student loans look like?
Well, if we forgave or canceled student loans, we would immediately see a huge uptick in the number of people certainly buying houses, having children, going out and spending, creating more small businesses to make the local economy thrive. We would see a dramatic improvement in the quality of life, essentially, in the United States, because these student loans are just a big burden on people.
Strangleholds.
Yes, and it truly is not necessary. I mean, in the same way that the government cancels or forgives debt from the big banks when they take money, the government can certainly just balance its checkbooks
quantitative easy
through its own means. It doesn't need the students' money for that. The students need that money. The alumni need that money for their own lives, to enhance the local economy. It's total self-handicapping that we're doing this. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of doom. The fact that they refuse to help the youth is going to mean that the youth are going to refuse to help the country.
Sadly, I see that as a big possibility as well. Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts on that. So next we'll move on to something closer to home. We are both, you and I, in the SELA region of California. So SELA is Southeast Los Angeles, and a big development that happened just this week, actually. So LA Times article by Christian Martinez entitled LA Rep. Lucille Roybal Allard, the first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress, will retire. So that leaves a big gaping hole in the 40th Congressional District, which is under our jurisdiction. And one of the opening quotes, Representative Lucille Roybal Allard, the first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress, will not seek re-election in her soon-to-be redrawn Los Angeles district, she announced Monday. This is her words, actually. After 30 years in the House of Representatives, the time has come for me to spend more time with my family, Roybal Allard, 80, wrote in a news release. So who do you think is going to run in her place?
Right. Well, it's very interesting that she is retiring.
Right.
She's essentially been a staple of Southeast LA politics for a long time.
Right.
But so we've now heard that the mayor of Long Beach, Mr. Garcia, Robert
Interesting.
Garcia, is going to be running. So that's going to be interesting. He's certainly, in my view, not too different on policy from her.
Yeah.
Um,
See him in action.
and so, hopefully the primary fight will ignite a type of debate, which is sorely needed, given that she certainly, Roybal Allard, was not someone that boldly pushed the envelope on progressive policy. So hopefully we get that dialogue.
I think there's a different kind of dynamic happening these days. I think we're going to start seeing. First of all, there's a different kind of politics emerging right now. There is more. Most of these politicians that we see, like Roybal Allard or Linda Sanchez or Garcia that you just mentioned, they're of a very old guard of politics. There's a certain style that they've adopted. They've known that style. It's a very 20th century style of politics. But there's this new kind of politician. On one side, you can see someone like an AOC, like the sort of social media elected official. There's a Trump on the right. There's a sort of I hate to use this example, but Lauren Boebert or what's the other one? Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
There's a different style of politician emerging in this day and age. So I think we might be surprised by what we might see come out, especially out of Southeast Los Angeles. There may be someone just like waiting in the wings to come out and surprise us.
Absolutely. We'll have to see. I think people will start declaring fairly soon. I know there's already some declared candidates, but this is an interesting district now with the map. So it does include a good chunk of Southeast LA.
Yeah.
Like Downey, Bellflower, and Park, but it also includes almost all of Long Beach.
Which district was collapsing again? I know one of them is collapsing into the other, so because of the census.
Yes. So as a result of the perception by the census that there are less people living in Southeast Los Angeles, which is yeah, and it's actually I would partly blame Roybal Allard for the undercutting of people because she was the original co-author of the Dream Act and has been telling people that for a long time. Well, guess what? How about you fight for the Dream Act and get it passed, and fight for all immigrants so that everyone feels like they can fill out the census without fear of Trump coming after them, which is kind of what had happened. So she herself is at least partly responsible for what happened to her again. So the Democrats just carry out these self-inflicted wounds.
Not to mention, I think COVID was going on at the exact same time too. So everyone was wondering. I think most people were wondering, would the census even be, like valid? Because not to sound insensitive, but people were literally dropping every day, like in the numbers.
Yes, and the area was particularly hard hit.
Yeah, Los Angeles was a big one.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll have to see how this new district, what the dynamics will be. We have all the way from, I believe, South Central through Maywood and Highland Park, all the way to Bell Gardens and Downey, down Bellflower to Lakewood, and finally almost all of Long Beach. So that's a very, obviously, large area. Congressional districts have around 700,000 people. So we're gonna have to. We'll see who emerges, but definitely at the top of the pack now is Robert Garcia, Mayor of Long Beach.
Do you ever really feel the support of reps in the House? Like, do you ever fully feel their influence in local districts, the districts they serve?
I can tell you that living in Roybal Allard's district, I have never perceived any positive influence.
Right.
I feel like I've perceived negative influence, but she, as well as the rest of them, unfortunately do not get involved. And I say unfortunate because I think that government works best when the different levels are kind of working together, or at least attempting to do better things together. Because oftentimes, you go to a U.S. House of Representatives office and you ask for this, but then they tell you, oh, you got to talk to your city council for that. Oh, but the city council tells you, oh, we don't have the money for that. Well, guess what? Guess who can get them the money, or in theory, advocate at least for it. So no, I feel like congressional representatives, for the most part, we hear about some of them in the national news, but oftentimes we don't even hear about our local ones. And if we do, it's probably some scandal. It's not anything substantial.
It's always a negative. That it's like, oh,
yeah. Like we never, for example, hear about how they vote. I'll give you an example here. Probably very few people know that Lucille Roybal Allard voted for things like the Department of Homeland Security ICE funding. So that's kind of a curious situation, because you're claiming to be pro-immigrant, and you have all these advocates in the district saying, we need to, quote, abolish ICE, or we need just a different immigration policy, but there you are funding it. So, but people don't know about that because, of course, we don't have any local media that's vaguely transparent.
How involved in your ideal world, how involved would reps be? Like what would their role be in the communities that they represent?
Yeah, well, I envision the possibility that reps should be far more involved than they ever have been, and the reason for that is because the U.S. Congress is a very important and powerful governmental instrument. However, it does not flex its muscles much for good purposes. It definitely does it for, in my book, bad purposes, like trillions upon trillions of dollars for war. Well, how about trillions and trillions for healthcare and education? Why don't we have that? Well, it's because they're not only bought and paid for, but by the defense industry, but they are also not engaged in the community. So again, as you were saying, they perhaps don't even see the need for funding for education. They don't get it.
So this one should be interesting for you in particular. So I actually went on Ballotopia and I found this graphic of your race. Actually.
Yes.
And this was a crowded field, actually. So this is a crowded field. I'm looking at this graphic right now, and it seems like Roybal Allard got like 50% of the vote. C. Antonio Delgado, the only Republican in the field, got 13%. And then David Sanchez, 13%. Anthony Felix Jr., 12%, 12.4%. And then you got 7%. That, I mean, in this kind of crowded field, especially with a heavy hitter like Roybal Allard in there, and to get 77%, I would be very proud of that, actually. How did that feel to know that at least 7% of the district was with you?
Sure. So I'm always fascinated by those numbers. I mean, so what the numbers you just read are from the primary of 2020. So before that, that was the second time that I was a candidate against her. The first time was I think I got like 19 or something like that, 20. So that was in 2018. So those numbers are always interesting, and especially if you look at the final numbers for 2020, you'll see that it's vaguely similar to how. So it really tells us there's a lot of Democrats in the district. So I ran as a Green Party candidate. So those numbers tell us that there's certainly a lot of Democrats in the district. She, as we saw in the primary in 2020, she didn't really have a overwhelming not set of numbers.
It feels like very much one of those like institutionalist secures her spot with heavy influence sort of
Yes,
thing.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and I mean, yeah, I do agree with you as a not to kind of like buttress myself, but I agree with your assessment that yes, I mean 7% is actually fairly high for a third party candidate.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the key. So I ran third party for various reasons.
Yeah.
But
And imagine if that lane wasn't crowded, if it was just Roybal, Allard, see Antonio Delgado as the Republican, he's going to be there. And then it was just like what that split would be. I would like to see that race actually.
right, that would have been interesting. But of
Yeah.
course, yes, we had, I mean, the other two Democrats that jumped on, David Sanchez, who, I think ran against Roybal Allard, I think 3 times before this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a fighter. He's been in the struggle for a long time. Anthony Felix is newer. I don't know if he's still going to be running again.
Yeah.
But the Democrats certainly split the vote. I mean, the alternative Democrats to her, and then perhaps maybe more progressive, left-leaning votes probably went towards myself. But of course the Republican. I mean, I predicted those patterns certainly before the race. You could find people that tell you, oh yeah, that's what Rodolfo said, that he would be getting essentially, because we knew the Republican was going to be advancing.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, with this top 2 system that has some pluses, but I think we can see a real negative here. For example,
actually, I don't see any pluses.
Yeah,
I think it's the detriment of our society, to be honest. It's just you can't lump. I mean, I just did an update around exactly how many typologies are in our system today, and you can't lump those into 2 categories. You just can't. There's just too many voices in the field.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would agree certainly with overturning it. So yeah, we'll just have to see. But yeah, I respected my 7%. That was I think it speaks to. I mean, I've done a lot of work in the community, so people certainly know my name.
What lessons did you learn from that race in particular?
Oh my gosh. Well, that particular race in 2020 was a very. I knew there was no probability of me making it beyond the primary, so I didn't really do much in that race. I actually kind of try to support others who I thought had a higher chance of making it through in their own races. But I think that I learned a lot in terms of that. I mean, but I think when you're a candidate, the best thing you can do is engage with the community, especially if you're not a corporate candidate. If you're a corporate candidate, your advisors, consultants will tell you what to do, and it will involve very fancy dinners, and maybe some photo ops with the community. But the best thing I learned is to engage with the community and really try to understand the depths of what's going on in the community. So that's something that certainly I continue to do, and I would encourage everyone to do, because oftentimes these processes are going on in our communities and we don't realize it, and then when we do realize it, we don't realize how far it goes, how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah, I definitely do respect. That's one thing I do really respect about specifically Green Party candidates, like the kind of lane they've been able to carve out, like from nothing. It's like extremely grassroots. Not even like there was no structure, and they built it themselves.
Yes.
I don't know if you know Kenneth Mejia.
Of course.
Yeah, he was running out of the 34th, I believe.
Yes.
And now I think in the same district he's running for comptroller.
Yes, he's running for LA City controller. So he might win. I think he's bringing a lot of insight to people. He's letting them know about what the budget is doing. So I think that those are the kind of things that grassroots, non-corporate candidates should do to try to give information to the community, because like I told you before, like, I mean, and all these other people ran against Roybal Allard.
Right.
But a fundamental question in the community was, well, why should we replace Roybal Allard? She's been there since 1993.
I think that's the reason to replace her.
Well, maybe that's you, but I think a lot of people don't go that far. Maybe people are actually looking, well, has she done anything wrong? And in my book, she has, but people don't know about that because we don't have a media that informs people.
Exactly.
So we need to do the hard work of informing the community about what the elected officials are doing.
Right. Does the possibility of a run intrigue you? Another one?
I wouldn't say so at this point. No, it's so. Well, here's one very negative thing that I learned about, in the campaign. You asked me about something positive, I'll tell you about something negative. It's very unfortunate a lot of people think that when you run for an office, people assume that everything else that you're doing to attempt to improve the community is just because you want to get elected. Right. So that's something that really actually left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I mean, I was involved in the community way before I decided to run.
Right.
And I'm still involved, and I'm certainly not a candidate right now.
Yeah.
So I hope that people just start contributing more in the community, and at some point we'll have candidates. Some people will be candidates, but really a candidate should just be someone that is representing a movement. It shouldn't be some isolated individual with their own, quote, unique ideas and the scheming along with what it is that they want to do. All candidates and elected officials need to be held accountable to a broader movement.
Right.
So the answer is no. I mean, not at this point, because I really am devoted at this point to attempting to help the movement to grow, to become stronger, because we need a strong movement to be able to withstand, these politicians.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. It's unfortunate. I think most people are just mistrusting of anyone seeking power, whether it's for good or ill. It's just one of those things. You say that you're running for something, and then there's immediately the ear raise, like, so you just want my vote,
Yeah.
But it's like, of course, I need your vote to do this thing that I'm trying to do. It's part of that exchange.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that some people will have that mindset no matter what, but it's one of those unavoidable things.
Yeah, I think it's coming out of this deep history of useless American politicians.
Too many lies.
Yes,
way too many lies. So I get it. I really do. It's just one of those things that election after election, elected official after elected official, just the lies have just heaped one on top of the other, and people are just done.
Exactly. So that's what if there's a grassroots candidates, non-corporate candidates, that's really the core of what you have to fight. Yeah. You have to talk about the ways that the government could be functional instead of dysfunctional and just full of lies.
Yeah. Now, what's your vision for SELA overall?
I think that we are a community that has a lot of promise, but unfortunately, we've been held back by policy choices. Yeah. There's all sorts of policy choices that hold us back. There's, for example, literally for the pollution that is extremely prevalent in the region. Yeah. Well, why do we have so much pollution? Well, it's because they've been allowed to go unregulated oftentimes, and they completely violate, air quality standards, soil quality standards. Well, all that needs to be cleaned up to the damage and that has harmed our health. That needs to be addressed. But we have a lot of desire to grow as a community. So the main way to do it is to get activated in the community and to form better governments.
The one that gets me is infrastructure. There are so many parts of LA that I hit certain corners or go on certain back streets, and I look at the road and I'm like, what? With the amount of money that Los Angeles has and can shift around, you would think that at least our roads would be paved. I remember seeing this, I don't know if it's still there, but somewhere in downtown LA was one of the most atrocious potholes I've ever come across. Like, this thing was a well. Like, I was like, wow, that is a doozy.
Right. I mean, and thankfully, I think that we're somewhat better here, like in Downey,
Yeah, yeah,
but still, there's a lot of left to be desired in terms of infrastructure. I mean, you mentioned the roads. There's also things like the water pipes.
right,
Water pipes need to be immediately replaced.
right.
They're but as we now know from this week, we're not going to have this Build Back Better package, which was already a watered down version of what we truly need.
Damn Joe Manchin.
Yes.
All right. And those are the kind of people exactly that I'm speaking of. It's the ridiculous Joe Manchin types. You're not a Democrat, Joe Manchin. Go be a Republican.
Right.
All right. So lastly, bit of a shocker. Some local news in the city of Downey. I know we both do a lot of work in the city of Downey. There has been a recent dust up around 3 of the council members, one of which we do a lot of work with, calling for a vote to release one of the city manager, longtime city manager Gilbert Livas. I think he has 10 years under his belt, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a hearing to take it to a vote to decide what to do with his release or not. And the community came out in droves, or at least a certain segment of the community came out in droves. The business crowd, the Downey Chamber of Commerce. I saw some of the clergy council, some of the business community, some of the people from the promenade, and yeah, one after the other, people who have long-time close relationships with Livas. And what's interesting about this is I get where the impetus was. I get why they wanted to do that, because there are not to mention there could still possibly be something that they had. I think they ultimately backed off because the backlash would have been huge, especially around this time. I remember saying some things around that effect. Just the timing of it was a little off, I think. But yeah, not to mention that there could still be something that could actually nail him to the wall. But yeah, the backlash was just huge. What did you think about what you saw?
Well, I definitely was surprised by the lack of arguments against it, So that's something that really came to the forefront. Yeah. So that tells you that indeed the community strongly is supporting him, at least those that showed up. Yeah. And it seems that the council members that were in favor of removing him, well, it doesn't seem like it has much community support. I think there may have been one comment in favor of removing Livas. It really does show that Livas has a lot of people in the community that support him. Of course, as you mentioned, those were particular segments. We saw no tenants saying keep Livas. We saw no, very young people keeping him. In fact, the room was not young in the least bit. They were established members of the community.
The movers and shakers.
Absolutely. They were strongly opposed to deposing of Livas. So, it informs us of those who are politically active in Downey. Well, who are they and what do they want? Well, they certainly want Livas in there.
And I get why that segment would come out from, because I'm sure those are the people who have most closely dealt with him, planning exchanges, city council meetings to get certain provisions for their stores, their sections of the community, their industries as a whole within the city. They would all closely deal back and forth with Livas. But that also speaks to a certain bias that could be there, though, and a certain complicity, I could say, because of the lack of arguments against it.
Right. Well, I mean, he had a lot of people who put him in office argue against removing him.
Right.
So it seems very clear that he has fulfilled whatever duties, responsibilities, goals those people who put him there wanted him to have. He hasn't failed them. So that's why they indeed came out in droves. So,
Right.
I mean, I think it's very clear that they decided to pounce on this very important issue, because I mean, some of them did speak out. This is a profoundly important issue, and it, of course, it is, because a city manager is in charge of implementing, policy. In theory, you shouldn't really have a city manager that pushes their own policy.
Exactly.
They should be taking direction from the council members and overseeing the implementation of the council. So, a city manager is put in place to ensure the long-term success of the vision of those who were in power at that point. So clearly, they came out and supported their guy.
Yeah. And there's also the issue of who would have replaced them. If there are long-standing projects, I know there are a few infrastructure slated things. I don't know exactly how much Livas has his hand in those things, but just someone coming in, taking over long-standing projects would have posed its own difficulty.
Absolutely. But, I mean, to their arguments, there is something to be said about continuity in leadership. Of course, in this case, again, it's the continuity of leadership that implements the policies of a particular vision of Downey.
That's true.
And, I was one of the many people that spoke up, and, I think my comment was kind of perhaps interesting. It was a bit of a neutral-ish comment, although not very neutral. I mean, I spoke up about the fact that ultimately Livas is an employee of the city, of course, and yet we had kind of a trumped up set of circumstances that led to that meeting where everyone was speaking. And I thought that was an egregious violation of really how the city should be doing things. If the city of Downey, we pride ourselves on being transparent and forthright and doing things by the book, doing essentially a good job, but yet, information seemed to have been leaked to the press about it.
Yeah, it was very careless mishandling of information, I think. And parts of that I didn't find up to snuff as well. It was the manner in which I found out actually from a tweet.
Exactly. So did I.
And that, I don't think that is, I mean, we won't mention any names, but the unprofessionality of how that was released to the public, I think actually contributed to that loud outcry.
Absolutely. It was unprofessional and illegal.
Yes.
So that's one thing, going back to what we were saying before, I try to give information that I think is accurate information. And I hope that everyone else does that too, that they bring to the table accurate information so we can digest it and, figure out a way forward. So what happened is that they had a what they call a closed session meeting to talk about the manager's employment. Well, that's supposed to stay in there, internal with them. That's a state law. It's a personnel matter. So none of them should have talked about it with anybody. But apparently they somehow it ended up in the local paper. And so that's troubling. There's no way that that's going to go uninvestigated. In fact, I'm sure there's an investigation. There's no way that cannot be investigated. I mean, there's been many cases in other cities where that happens. I mean, so again, we need a functional government that people should follow. I mean, the government should follow its own rules.
And I think if it's not investigated, I think that speaks to the very reason why I think some some council members would seek to relieve the city manager in the midst of that. The fact that kind of mishandling of information could be left to stand without any real even slap on the wrist.
Right.
It doesn't sit right in a way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But in theory, if you violate the closed session component of the Brown Act, which it's very obvious that they did.
Yeah, breach of protocol.
Yeah, they might have to go up before a grand jury.
Right.
So that could be interesting.
Well, Rodolfo, it was an honor to have you on the podcast.
Honor is all mine. Thank you for having this podcast.
This was fun. Yeah. There needs to be a place for people to talk about these kinds of things. At the federal level, I mean, there are enough people doing that, but especially at the local level, that's where I feel it's needed the most. And I think that's where this is going to excel. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you for having this podcast. Gravely needed.
So this has been a Purple Fox episode. This is your host, Kevin C. Eze, signing out.